Welcome back to the Thrive on Mission podcast. I'm Dave Jones, minister at the Millwood Church of Christ, and as always with Jim Book, Associate Director of the Christian Restoration Association.
Great to be with you again, Dave,
Yeah,
as always.
We are in week 3 of our conversation about 4 characteristics of a biblically sound and culturally relevant church. The first week we talked about how good deeds and the good news fit together and they're compatible, and we need to do that. Last week we talked about the church being a vital part of a healthy community beyond the walls of our building. And this week we have a special guest. It's Rase Martin from KYOWVA, who will be presenting a Zoom call for the Mission 120 preachers.
Dave, you and I both have worked with Rase and spoken at the KYOWVA regional events, some of the ones they do. Of course, KYOWVA stands for Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia Evangelistic Association. Rase is a church planner, but he also has a heart for the struggling church. But he introduced a program on our Zoom call, and I think in an event, Dave, that you were at speaking, it's a program that consists of ways for churches to find out what the DNA of their local community is. I mean, everything from socioeconomic background, education, how many single moms are in their community, what the socioeconomic status is. So when we are building these externally focused ministry programs, we know, all right, what's my audience? All right. And so this DNA study that's available to all of our churches and preachers who want it can download this information. And so they can kind of like laser focus on the needs of their community, because you can't reach your community if you don't know your community. So I think you're going to really enjoy what he has to say. It's extraordinarily informative.
So here is Rase Martin, and he'll be helping us understand ministering and serving are vital aspects of the local church.
First of all, I just want to share my appreciation for CRA, for Dave, the Thrive podcast, for what Jim is doing with Mission 120. Just really excited to have this platform and opportunity to share with the listeners what it can be gained from an understanding of demographics and psychographics. Serving as the executive director for KYOWVA Evangelistic Association, I've had the opportunity to visit a lot of churches, do consultations, and just kind of see some needs in area churches and even in just our tri-state. And that led me on a journey of developing demographic materials, psychographic information, just to help churches better know their communities so that they can serve their communities better and ultimately introduce them to a relationship with Christ. And that started for me about 7 years ago through a company called Perceps. And Perceps was the kind of the dragnet of the demographic community. It was just the facts. You had information, demographic information, but there was no flashy collars, nothing like that. You just got the basic information, and that was helpful. But we then found that Church Answers also offered demographic information, and they added an additional element called psychographic information. And so we transferred and started using some of that Church Answers material. And by buying them in bulk, we were able to pass that discount on to the churches. And again, over the course, I started finding, man, this information is really helpful. It's really useful, and we need to try to get it into the hands of people. I have some good news in the sense that through doing these demographic reports and demographic studies, we're on the verge of being able to offer our own fully in-house demographic report, not relying on any outside entities. This will be a strictly inside the restoration movement demographic report. We're using Esri, the same technology that Church Answers use. So you'll be getting the same information. It'll just come through a strictly restoration movement lens. So I'm really excited to be talking about that and what's going to be available in the coming weeks. And so as we get into this discussion, I want to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully you're watching this, because I think the value is in the things that you're going to see. And in the discussion, just wanting to start with what are demographics and psychographics. We've got to make sure that we understand what we're talking about, that nobody's confused, so that we get off on a good starting point. Demographics are simply who the people are. That's the people that are in your community. You're going to find out the types of family units that are in your community, the gender makeup of the community, the age makeup, what different generations are living in that community, the ethnicity, household incomes. This is just the straight line information about who the people are. The additional element is what's called psychographics. And what Esri does is break down communities into different segments. And so they have different ways of categorizing the people that live in a community based upon things like motivation, things that they believe, political leanings, what they do on a regular basis, the type of media they consume. All that information kind of puts people into categories. So you not only know who is in your community as far as the kind of people that are there, but you also know something about what they think, how they behave, and how what they think actually impacts and directs how they behave. So all of that information is extremely helpful to just kind of break that information down. So the next few slides are just showing that. So if you got to know your community report, it would be breaking down the educational elements of your community. You would know the population size. This is a 15-minute radius from the church building. So we start with the church building and we go 15-minute drive time around that location. And so based upon that information, here's the facts that we're getting. Find out the median age. We find out the average household size, what the median income is, how many people are employed, how many people are unemployed, the number of businesses that actually employ people in that 15-minute radius. You can also see a breakdown of the generations. How many greatest generation do we have? How many baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, Generation Zs, and alphas? And all of this is going to be instructive as we try to think about the people that are close to us and how we can best minister in an effective way to reach them. As we find out about demographic information, I like to think of it, twofold. We want to be able to meet needs. So we want to get information about our community to find out what needs are present so that we can meet those needs. But we also want to meet people. We don't want to just stop at meeting needs. We can be just like every other good works institution in the community. We have the gospel. We have something that separates us from every other institution. So as we go out into our communities to meet these needs, we also want to meet people. So we need to find out the people that are in our community as well. This slide shows you the kinds of needs. There's some poverty needs. There are healthcare struggles. There are people who are employed. This particular community has a 6.7% unemployment rate. You find out the kind of jobs that people work. A lot of white collar, a few blue collar, and some in the service industry. All this information, again, is just telling us about our community. This slide is showing the different ethnicities within a community and what size they were in 2010, what size they are today, and projections moving forward. And if you see the screen, you can see that this community in particular has a projection that the Hispanic population is going to continue to grow. So there's a growing Hispanic population. The church needs to be aware of that. And, what ways can we be most effective in serving the Hispanic community in through our programs and things that we are providing. And so this screen is just showing you the breakdown. So this is all that information kind of brought in a more condensed form so that you can see everything that we have been discussing. And it's kind of a dashboard. Okay, this is, a quick look. Not only will you get a full-blown demographic report, but we're also going to provide you with a summary, some confirmations, some surprises, and how that should guide your ministry response. This screen is talking about the difference between knowing the county and knowing the city. And so this is for a small little town, Flemingsburg, in Flemingsburg, Kentucky. And so on the left, you see what the demographics were for the city, and on the right, you see the demographics for the county. And what you'll see is the median age in the city is much lower than the median age of the county. That's instructive. Also, the median household income is much lower in the city than it is in the county. And so since the church building is located in the city, their neighbors are younger and have less income. Therefore, the poverty rate is higher. Home ownership is much lower in the city. There are much more renters. There is a rent burden. 33.4% of the income that people are receiving, that's going to paying for rent. Out in the county, there's a much higher home ownership. 76% of people own their own homes in the county. So if you just took a single snapshot, it might give you a different picture. But by comparing them side by side, you realize, okay, if we're strictly focusing on trying to reach the city, trying to reach the immediate area around us, it's a very different demographic than if we just consider the outer community, the outer county. And so a lot of our people may even be driving from the outer regions, but they're driving through the struggles that we see in our city. And so they're becoming more and more aware of those opportunities as they come into the city. Why do we need demographics and psychographics? This might seem, a very important thing to ask, and definitely something that we need an answer to. I did a church consultation for a church, and when I arrived there, this is an overview of where the building is. As you can see, they have a wonderful building, really nice, and it is really visible. You can see it. The main road is to the right side of the screen. It's what it says, Union City Road. And so that's the main road running through the town. And so the building is clearly visible. What I do typically when I do a church consultation is I like to get there early. I like to go to a couple of places in the town, whether it be a gas station, restaurant, something along those lines, and try to get some information. Try to find out, is the community aware of the church? So in this particular situation, I went to a diner, had dinner. As I was checking out, the lady at the cash register was, taking my money, and I asked her, I said, I'm from out of town. I'm here to meet with a church, and I don't know where it is. Could you help me find it? And she pointed me in the complete wrong direction. She told me 3 miles in the opposite direction of where I had, just come. And so I knew she was not aware of where the church was located. Well, I went around the corner and did the same thing at the local grocery store. Went in, bought some mints, bought some water, said, hey, I'm from out of town. I'm looking for this church. Could you help me find it? She pulled out her phone. She said, well, I don't know where it is, but I can find it on my phone. And she did. She pulled it up on her phone, said, yeah, it looks like you go down this road a couple miles and it's on the right-hand side of the road. I said, thank you. And I went for the consultation with the church. As I was meeting with the church leadership that night, I told them the story. I said, I went to the diner, asked them this question. They didn't know where you were. I went to the grocery store, asked them a question. They didn't know where you were located at. So the community doesn't know about the church. The church, it's not making the radar of the community. Well, one of the elders kind of pushed back, said, the community they know where we are. And I'm like, well, I just spent $13 to prove that they don't. They don't know where you are. You see, the reality is it doesn't matter if our buildings are visible to our communities if our churches aren't. And in many cases, our churches are just not visible to the community because we're not in the community. We're not loving and serving the community. We're not meeting the needs of our community, and we're not meeting the people in our community. And so what demographics help us do is help us better understand the people in the community so that we might meet them, meet their needs, and ultimately and hopefully show them the glorious gospel and help introduce them to a saving relationship with Christ. And so all this information is useless if we don't do anything with it. We've got to take the information and actually put it to action. And that's one of the most frustrating things about doing demographic reports. From the very outset, 7 years ago, I started doing Percep's demographic reports, and that woman told me from the very start, 90% of the churches that you will do demographic reports for will do nothing with them. And that's proven true. The vast majority of churches I provide these demographic reports for, we might even have a follow-up meeting, and this goes into a file somewhere, and nothing ever happens. And so what I am encouraging churches to consider is to actually appoint somebody as the community engagement person, maybe a deacon. If you have a deacon, set him aside specifically as the community engagement person. What happens so many times is this information ends up on the desk of the preacher, and it just becomes another thing that the preacher has to do, and it gets buried among all the other work that the preacher has to do. There's sermons to write, there's Bible studies to write, there's people to visit the hospital, there's funerals to do, there's marriages to do. All those kinds of things come up on a regular basis. And so all those urgent needs are what take priority. And that's right. That should be the case. Those are the things that, the preacher should be focusing on. But if you had somebody in the church who is just the contact person, the person that this information runs through, this person's responsible for making sure meetings are happening. This person would be responsible for making sure that the outreach events are happening, that people have the materials that they need. This person can do the follow-up after those events happen and find out, hey, how did it go? What did we learn? What can we do better? Any of those kinds of things. And then, I can work directly with that person. That person doesn't have to come up with any of the strategy or to come up with any of the numbers. They just got to be the voice in the room. They just got to be the person in the church that, hey, we know when this is happening, this is the person that we need to go through. And I think that provides the best opportunity to actually do something with this information when there's a person that's specifically set aside to be the person that helps take the demographics, take the information, and actually put it to practice. And so how do we use demographics? If we have the information, how do we actually turn them into information that we can use? What you see on the screen are some personas. And simply what that does is it takes the information from the demographic and it puts a name to it. It makes it real. It's not just a number. It's not just a stat. It's an actual person. And so on the screen, you have a couple of examples based upon the demographic information. These are some of the people that you might come across in the community. And it helps us know and be aware of some of the things that, these individuals might be struggling with and things that we might be able to do to actually meet the needs that they have. And so that's the important part of the information, is to actually put faces, actually put, a person with the statistic. What Esri does is, I go back to the psychographic information that we talked about earlier, and it puts the community into different segments. And so based upon the breakdown of the demographics of the community, you start finding out what segments that, they are in and how many people in your community actually fit in those segments. And so you see like a name, Southern Satellites, 40.9% of the community fits in that category. Well, what does that mean? Well, that describes working class families who have long commutes. They have a strong DIY ethos and they're highly cost conscious. They're thinking about money and what they're doing with it. They have a faith posture. They're favorable to faith, but they may not be attending church. So they may have a church background. They may have, church information. They may even know church language, but they may not be associated with a church. And so we can find out from their behavior, what actually aligns with, what their beliefs are. They're not antagonistic to the church, but they're not attending the church either. And so that gives us information. And as you can see, there's like 60 different segment groups that Esri puts people in. So, you can really get bogged down if you spend a lot of time just focusing on, one particular element, but, you kind of get a snapshot of here's where your focus needs to be. These different segments within your community. But not only does our community have people, but our communities also have problems. They have major needs. This is a report for the Boyd County, Kentucky area. And based upon that, we see they have 94.2 people overdose out of every 100,000 people. That's 3 times the national average. The national average is 32 for every 100,000. So there's obviously a drug problem. There's a need in that community to address the overdose epidemic. And so how do we do that? What's that look like? And most times, that the first reaction is to say, well, we need a recovery program. So let's get a recovery program started. And that may be a legitimate need. There may be a need for a recovery program. Then again, your community may already have 6 recovery programs going on. And so a recovery program may not be the most immediate need. So maybe the most immediate need is to not work directly with those who are in addiction. Maybe we need to focus on those who are caught up in the web of, what happens with addiction, like the families. Maybe there's grandparents now raising grandchildren because of the drug problem. There are kids who their home lives have been just destroyed. They've lived their lives in the midst of destruction. And so maybe the way that the church can faithfully serve those being affected by the opioid epidemic is not actually helping those actually in need of recovery. It may be helping their families. It may be serving them. One of the beautiful things is maybe you've got a guy in your congregation who is real handy with fixing stuff. What would it look like for him to take on, a young man and mentor him and show him how to take something that's broken like a bicycle and build it and make a new bike out of it. And then the young person gets the bike, after that. But you've actually shown him how to do something, how to take something that's broken and make it whole, how to be constructive rather than having their lives be marred by destruction. Have that mentorship. Maybe a young lady, teach her some stitching, maybe teach her some things like cooking. Just teach her a way to be constructive, to actually learn some skills that brings something positive out of all the negative that they are experiencing. And again, we go back to that idea. We're meeting needs and we're meeting people. We're spending time with them. And so that's just one simple idea. There are a lot of communities, as this screen displays, where there are just a lot of physical needs, a lot of people dealing with disability, a lot of things that are happening. And so what we want to do with that is to try to think about, okay, if we have a lot of single parents, how do we serve them? If we have a lot of seniors, how do we serve them? Maybe, as you get older, you're not able to move around as much. You need help in ways that you didn't need help before. If you've got some DIY guys in your congregation, maybe one way to serve the seniors in your community is by putting on some grab bars, around the house. Maybe a ramp needs built to help get into the house. The key thing is you want to match the strength of your congregation with the needs of the community. Going back to that idea of single parents. This is a demographic for a community that had a high commuter rate. The average commute was of 31 to 33 minutes. 10.5% took that level of a commute. 23% had less than a 90-minute commute. So, a quarter of the people who lived in that community had up to a 90-minute commute. That's pretty healthy. It's a pretty healthy commute. Well, if you have a single mom that's got a couple of kids that, she drops them off at school, but maybe she's not able to get home just in time to get them off the bus, who's there for her? Well, maybe one thing that the church could do in a situation like that is to provide, a place for those kids to be able to come, maybe to get some tutoring if they're having some struggles in school, maybe to get some help with homework, have a meal ready for them, so that mother isn't thinking about, well, I hope my kids are safe. I hope the older sibling is taking good care of the younger sibling, because that's the best scenario that I had. That's the best answer that I had. The more aware that you are of what's going on in the community, the more you can be strategic in what the actual ministry opportunities that you offer to your community would be. And so take the strengths of your congregation and match them with the needs of your community. You got some mechanics attending your church. What would it look like to provide, a place for single moms to come and get their oil changed, maybe to get their car looked over, make sure everything's okay. Maybe they're doing those 25, 30-minute commutes one way every day, and they can't afford to take it to a mechanic. What kind of service could we provide? There's a lot of communities that have a lack of health care available to them. What if the church provided some screening opportunities at the building? Maybe some nurses or retired teachers could help with either homework or some of these medical needs, maybe helping in those kinds of situations. Church property is a great place to provide these kinds of opportunities. And so we start out meeting a physical need that builds relational trust. That trust builds relationships. Relationships open the door to the gospel. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to meet needs, and we're trying to meet people. On the screen is another example. There's a church in Martin, Kentucky that was trying to figure out, hey, what can we do? We're an older congregation. There's not a whole lot of us. What can we do to reach and help serve our community? Well, if you have a group of about 20 people, and mostly 70s and 80s is the typical age range, you have a elementary school 2/10 of a mile away. Actually, you can step out the front door of the church building and you can see that school building. Well, the best solution for that congregation is not to start an upwards program. That might be a great answer for a congregation somewhere else, but that's not what this church can do. That wouldn't be matching their strengths with the community needs. So what they can do is they can be available during the day. They can be readers to go over and read to the kids. They can be there to help kind of come alongside a teacher and say, hey, what can we do? What do you need so that you don't have to buy these supplies yourself? What supplies are you lacking? Do you need Kleenexes? Do you need hand sanitizer? What can we do to adopt you and just show that we care about you? Those are just simple things to get involved. Most communities have a school that they can connect with, and there are opportunities to meet needs. But I encourage you to think about a couple of things. First, don't assume that you know what the needs are. Ask, don't assume. If you assume that you know what the needs are, you may be thinking, man, the school probably it's wintertime and maybe they need some coats. So we're going to do a coat drive and we're going to take in boxes of coats because surely the school could use coats. Well, if that was your immediate reaction, it was probably several other places' immediate reaction too. And so when you assume and you don't ask, you risk your blessing becoming a burden. You walk in with boxes of coats and the woman on the other side looks like she's about to cry because she's been trying to find a place to put all these coats. So think in terms of what you can do to actually meet the needs that the school has. Don't just assume that doing anything is going to be helpful. Second thing, maybe you hear about opportunities to serve and you get really excited. Man, that would be great. I hope that's the case. Don't over promise. Under promise, over deliver. One of the ways that we hope to build trust in our community is by loving and serving our communities and hopefully getting into the schools and doing the same thing. But if you promise and you don't deliver, instead of building trust, you've destroyed it. Instead of the schools saying, hey, we can trust those people. They said they were going to do something and they did it. Instead of that, you have people saying, well, they said they were going to come and do this and they stopped. They quit doing it. Always under promise, always over deliver, especially when it comes to serving the needs, at schools and the like. Something that I think is, a great opportunity is just to go into a laundromat, maybe on a Tuesday night, go in and do some servant evangelism, help people wash their clothes. You pay for the laundry service, you bring the laundry detergent, you bring the dryer sheets, and you just love and serve the community by providing this need for those who are there. And the thing that you're doing as you do this is you're buying time, because you have a captive audience. As the people are doing their laundry, it's going through the wash cycle, you've got time to talk to them. As it goes through the dry cycle, you've got time to talk to them. And so you have a captive audience, much in the same way the Apostle Paul preached to the guards who were guarding him because they were chained to him. You have somebody that's a captive audience to you now, because you put yourself where you're helping to meet a need, but also meet a person. You have a captive audience and an opportunity to share about the gospel of Jesus Christ. You have an opportunity to hear what they're dealing with. And maybe in the process of hearing what they're dealing with, maybe you become even more aware of other ways that you can actually plug into the lives of people. That's just another element of this whole thing. For those preachers, I think one of the most powerful ways that you can use this information in your sermons is by just providing a picture. You can talk about demographics, but help the church see, hey, this is a single mom. She's struggling. She's got 2 kids. She don't know how she's going to make ends meet. She's our neighbor. What are we doing to serve her? Maybe there's an elderly gentleman. He has trouble getting up and down his stairs. He doesn't drive much anymore. He's our neighbor statistically. I mean, he fits the category of the people that are in our community. What are we doing to reach out and saying, hey, we're here. What can we do? What ways can we serve you and help your situation? What needs do you have? I mentioned that the community I did this demographic report for had a rising Hispanic community. Who are the neighbors that we've been taught to overlook? Who are the people in our community that we're looking past? Are we aware of our neighbors and maybe the ways that we can faithfully love and serve them? What about the veteran? He's not wearing a robe. He's not lying in a ditch bleeding somewhere, but he's still our neighbor. He's still somebody in need. His needs are different. He needs somebody to talk to. He needs to know that there's somebody that cares about him. He's in our community, but are we aware of him? And what are we doing about our awareness of that need? And so I want to end just kind of talking from the heart, just kind of sharing what I think is really at the crux of all of this. Demographics make you aware, but they don't make you care. In the story of the Good Samaritan, there were 3 people who knew of a need. There were 3 people who were aware that a need was present. Only one of them actually met the need. Only one of them cared enough to actually do something about it. So you can be aware of a need, but if it doesn't lead you to do something about it, then we need to have different conversations. This isn't going to make people care. It's just going to make them aware. I read a quote from Ken Idleman, and it stuck with me. He was talking about the compassion of Jesus. And he said, when speaking about the compassion of Jesus, he said, what his heart felt, his hands touched. That is, the desire to go serve the community, to love the community, to not only meet practical needs, but actually share the gospel, starts at the heart level. It's not something that we can compel people to do and make them do. If you do that, you're going to have a limited ministry. It's not going to last very long because guilt just doesn't have staying power. But if we can actually help people be aware of the needs, but also help cultivate the compassion of Christ, that desire to see a need and meet that need, then we're able to sustain ministry for the long haul. And that's what makes this kind of information effective. Again, this information isn't a magic pill. It's not something that's just going to, just by presenting it, it's going to make all the difference. It'll make the difference if you've cultivated, a generous spirit within the people. If the people have truly been changed by the gospel and there's a real desire to actually, now that I'm aware of something, to actually have a way of going out and caring for those in the community. So again, I'm thankful for the platform. I'm thankful for the opportunity to share about the demographics, and would love to get to know, churches that have any needs, and help to share this information and actually talk through some strategies about making this something that your church can do in an effort to meet the community around you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dave.
Hey, Rase, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for that. A couple questions come to mind. First would be, if a church wants to proceed and do these studies that you propose, how would they go about doing that? And it seems like it could be an expensive investment. What does it cost to do this, and how could churches afford to do something like this?
Yeah, so we typically ask, that initial report. The reports that we do through Church Answers, they cost us $120 buying them bulk. And so before I would ever say, hey, if your church says, hey, we can't afford that, all right, we'll work with you. We'll try to make it happen. Don't let that keep you from doing something. Typically, like I said, these reports cost us $120, and that's what we ask in return is, $120 investment. And then, we're going to pour into you. We're just not going to give you a report and say, okay, figure it out. We're going to spend time with you. We're going to sit down and we're going to provide you some strategic options, some things to think through. We're going to give you a lot to process. And so what we ask is, if this is helpful, would you consider investing so that we can do this more and more and more? Because, right now, KYOWVA is taking the brunt of the cost because they're paying me to do all the work. So if it's blessing the church, then, hey, could you give something back so that we can pay it forward and keep making it an impact and making a difference? So that's the, the cost part of it. The way to get in contact, you can go to our website, www.kyowva.com. There is an email there on the site that you can get in contact with us by, or you can contact me at my personal email. It's Rase, RASE, .KYOWVA, KYOWVA @gmail.com. And we will be glad to get the process started and just get a lot of information in your hands, quickly. And then, that's kind of the introductory phase, and then build from there.